China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is visiting Singapore on a two-day trip. Singapore is the third stop of his regional tour. That's after visits to Vietnam and Cambodia. Trade and investment, COVID-19 and security, they are all key focuses of Mr Wang's trip to the region. The Chinese envoy has pledged more than $270 million in aid and 3 million more doses of COVID-19 vaccines to Cambodia. In Vietnam, Mr Wang issued a stark warning, urging Beijing and Hanoi to avoid magnifying disputes in the South China Sea. Mr Wang will end his tour in South Korea.
For a closer look, we're joined by Choi Shing Kwok from the ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute. Mr Choi, Wang Yi's trip coming shortly after Kamala Harris visited the region. Is this a counterbalancing move?
Well, I think yes and no. Yes, because it comes just 2 weeks after the visit of Kamala Harris, as you said. But I believe this is actually only more true for Vietnam because Wang Yi has not visited Vietnam this year. And their relationship with the US is more on an upward trajectory. In terms of vaccine diplomacy, China has also fallen behind the US in Vietnam's case after the recent visit by Harris. However, for Cambodia and also for Singapore, I would argue that the US is the one playing the catch-up, whereas China's engagement with these countries has been both regular and substantive, especially in the areas of COVID assistance and economic ties. So Cambodia in particular has received a lot of help from China in terms of vaccines to support its program, and this has helped it to achieve a very high vaccination rate. So I don't think it's playing catch-up or needing to counterbalance that.
Well, there are certainly many areas of cooperation between Singapore and Beijing, but what's the significance of Wang Yi's visit to Singapore specifically?
Well, I think it's a further step to improve what is already a very good, perhaps even called excellent bilateral relationship that exists between the two sides. It's quite a short trip, just an overnight trip. But it is still an important one because Wang Yi is meeting all the top leaders here, both PM Lee, EPM Heng Swee Keat, as well as Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan. So although economic links are already very strong, there are always additional ways to further enhance economic engagement. And I think that Singapore leaders are keen to explore new openings, especially in growth areas such as the digital economy, where both sides can further expand cooperation and investment. In addition, I think that the regional comprehensive economic partnership, which both Singapore and China are part of, is targeted to come into force by January 2022. So attention to this has been actually shifted away because of the pandemic in many countries, but I think that there's a need for both countries to see how this can be brought into force as soon as possible. One other topic which I think would be significant in the talks between two sides would be the situation in Myanmar. I think that both countries are very concerned because what's happening down there is likely to lead to some kind of a humanitarian disaster, and that would have adverse consequences for all sides, including China, as well as ASEAN countries. Both countries have some leverage and would want ASEAN to succeed in improving the situation there as soon as possible. I think one other issue is that ASEAN and China are actually discussing upgrading the dialogue partnership relationship to a higher level. What it really means is something that I think both ASEAN and China are still trying to work out. So the discussion between both sides around this topic will also be of interest, I think, to Singapore leaders as well as also to China to hear what Singapore's reactions would be.
Is there a bigger role here for Singapore to play then, with specifically to do with the ASEAN and the Southeast Asian countries when it comes to China? For example, security situations or security issues like the South China Sea, which is quite disputed between several parties?
Well, I'm afraid not a lot that Singapore can do on the South China Sea. Singapore is able to play a bigger role in the earlier part of the South China Sea talks because it was the coordinator of the ASEAN-China Dialogue Partnership at that time. And it helped to move the process towards getting a single negotiating text for the Code of Conduct at that time. This was before the pandemic struck. I think not much progress has been possible since then, since the pandemic has made meetings difficult. Also, the issues are very complex and very divergent, both in terms of the geographical scope of the agreement, the legal status of this code, and also such other things such as the involvement of extra-regional countries. So I think it's not just an issue of tensions that exist and which different countries may actually feel that there's a deficit in terms of trust, but also that the national interests for all the parties concerned in the South China Sea are actually different, even between ASEAN countries. So I think that Singapore could perhaps help by trying to explain the positions of all sides to build mutual understanding, but that may not go far enough.
Thank you so much for your time this evening. Choi Shing Kwok there from the ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute.